Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another special episode hosted by the Unstoppable Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Keegan Lamar, and this is the Sports Roundtable Series, episode 2. Now, returning back with us, we have Mr. Bill Dean. Thank you for being here, sir. And we have Mr. Morgan Koth. Thank you for being here as well, sir. And unfortunately, Kim had an emergency, but Kim Brady, I promise, she's a real human being. She will be a part of this at some point, and she will be joining us on here to give her thoughts, her reactions, her insight into all these different topics. But tonight, we're going to be talking about a few different things. Up on the docket for the night, we are going to be talking about really joy and passion in sports. You know, we're just getting out of the NCAA men's and women's tournaments. And I mean, it's one of those things where there's nothing like the men's and women's NCAA tournaments when it comes to the number of teams that are in it, the number of upset moments, the number of electric plays, compared to any other collegiate sport. I don't know if you get as many highlights in such a short time frame than you do from the men's and women's NCAA basketball tournament. So we're going to be diving into some examples of joy and passion in sports, and obviously give our thoughts on them in terms of, how people, whether, the way people celebrate and the way that people go about joy and passion and all these other things, especially when they're overcoming adversity. That's what these tournaments are all about, is overcoming challenge and adversity. The second thing we're going to be going over is playing the game and the politics. I think this is a very interesting topic, specifically because also coming out of specifically the men's national championship game, there are allegations against the University of Kansas that are currently en route to being pressed against, and that could potentially put the head coach for Kansas Jayhawk basketball head coach to be sidelined for potentially an entire season, or have the program miss next season's postseason. There's all these different things up in the air, and it's just a really good conversation to potentially open up to talk about how athletes should navigate some of these things, because some of these things, maybe the allegations are because of the player. Sometimes they have nothing to do with it. But it's a part of the game, especially at the collegiate level, because you have this massive governing body and not everybody is their own brand and entity. So gentlemen, if we're ready to get off to the races, I think this first topic, it would be very, very good to have this introduced to us by Bill. Bill, you had brought this up because you had actually been listening to a couple of interviews about, and you were telling us about the joy and the passion and all these different things that coaches were starting to talk about. Share kind of what you were listening to and what some of the feedback you were getting from it.
Yeah. Now, am I on the timer now, or we're
introducing? Don't worry. I won't put you on a timer just yet.
I got you on a timer, Bill. Don't worry. I'll come.
I know. Thank you. That's why I appreciate you, Mr. Koth. So, no, I thought it was a great topic for two reasons. I mean, yes, I thought Hubert Davis, not just the job he did coaching and the run that Carolina had, but the level of joy he had in his post-game interviews, or the weekend between the next game. He just really centered things around the pride of the school that he went to, the coaches that he followed, the young men that committed to him. They went through some slumps and some adversity during the season, and it really just kept bringing everything back to joy and enjoying the moment, which is kind of a cliche phrase, right? But I think when we talk mental performance, and I think a lot of times joy is misconstrued for, go have fun.
Bill, we're losing you.
Being
Should have put him on that timer.
Yeah, I should have had the timer off. Son of a biscuit. Bill, I'm going to take this torch and kind of run with it. So from what Bill is saying, while we wait for him to stop fist pumping,
He's in a moment of joy right now. I like it.
This is what pure joy looks like.
If you can't see this, so the people that are just listening, he's stuck on a fist pump. So it's fantastic imagery.
Our boy Bill has become so joyful. He has become ethereal and has dissipated into a billion little particles.
Go have fun.
And he's coming in and out. So what Bill's trying to say here is you hear coaches all the time, and Morgan, I'm going to want your thoughts on this as well. You hear coaches all the time talk about the passion and the joy throughout the season, about the process. And coaches talk about the process all the time. And it's normally, it's a question that everybody gets when it comes to, hey, what has this season been like so far for you? What kind of challenges have you overcome? How do you feel right now? And usually coaches and athletes all get these players or they all get these questions. Coaches and the players get this same question lined up for them. But I'm curious what your take on really the definition that they are using is when it comes to joy and overcoming adversity, because I think there's a ton of different ways that people can define it. So I'm curious what your experience with it is and what your normal definition of that looks like nowadays.
Yeah, great question, great points. And for me, when you're talking about joy and passion and really a mindset, right? You're talking about these different things that can either flow for you or flow against you. Because when you're in a season, it can be a grind, right? And you got to take, you hear coaches taking one day at a time, one game at a time, don't look ahead. We want to stay in the moment. But as a player, you always look ahead, right? And I think as a coach's job is to make sure that, and I really do, I think a coach's job is to make sure that the athletes are finding the joy, especially when you're talking about younger athletes, right? College, high school level. I think in pros, they're thinking, hey, this is professional, this is your job. This is you've got to be doing this. And, some days, I've never been a professional. So, I slipped at a Holiday Inn once, but, it wasn't at that point. But when you're talking about younger athletes, finding that joy, I know when you talk to athletes or being an athlete myself, whether it was baseball, whether it was, soccer season, whatever it might have been, you get into a point where it can be a lull, right? You can get into whether you're winning or whether it's losing or whatever, you're just in that, you're coasting. And when the coaches start talking about joy and when the kids are having fun all the time, and when there's that mindset of this is just what it's about, those are the teams that really start to excel, especially when you're starting getting towards the end of the season, right? At the end of the season, when teams start gelling and teams start, playing with a little bit more pop, a little bit more jump, a little bit more step. Those are the teams you look at and you're like, okay, they're coming to the, they're gelling at the right time. But really, you could almost look at that and say, hey, they're finding the joy, right? You've got that coaching staff, everybody's synced in. And when you can find that joy and you can start playing at the right time, especially at the end of a season, man, that's when things start to become special. And when you talk about, hey, game by game by game, let's scheme for what we have. Let's scheme for the other team. Let's make sure we're playing appropriately for where we are at the right time, at the right year, with the right team, the right mindset. I really believe that joy comes down to a lot of that, because when teams are having fun, when you're having fun together with a group, you remember when you're playing sports, when you were having fun with your boys or your girls or whoever it was that you were playing with, man, that made all the difference in the world. That joy made the difference of taking care of that grind, that season grind, because it can be a grind.
Yep. 100%. So Bill, we took that concept. Now that you're back with us, we took that concept that you were talking about. And we opened up the question of, what is your experience with joy in sports and how do you really define it? Because the question that everybody gets is, when it comes to joy and passion and all these other things, everybody has a different understanding of what that means for them. So we're just kind of trying to level set here. What does it mean to you when it comes to sports and joy?
Yeah, I would say, specifically growing up and playing sports through college, when I enjoyed things, I don't know that I wasn't at a point, right, where I was equating to being able to find my joy purpose or my joy statements. But I can definitely, reconnect with whether it was winning, just being around the teammates, the community recognition, all those things just brought joy. I think for me, as I've evolved in coaching and really pulled a lot from a lot of people smarter than me, it's being able to support your student athletes and finding that center point of joy year round, right? So during the season, during a game, during competition, how can you use that for yourself? How can you also influence others as teammates? But then on the flip side of it, how do you find the joy in the off season, right? The weight room, the conditioning, the knock the academics out of the ballpark. So, those things are in line. So I think really, where I'm at with individuals we work with and in some of the organizations, it's being able to help them break it out, in season, preseason, postseason, to really find that joy and purpose of why they're doing what they're doing.
100%. The way that I define joy is really that sense of alignment between when you're engaging with a sport and you feel like you're doing it in your most authentic way. I think that's where, at least for me, my experience, when I found joy playing a game, it was when I felt this sense of almost freedom whenever I played, because I was able to, compete at a really high level. I was pushing myself to my desired threshold of challenge and failure, right? Because I felt a sense of joy whenever I had a sense of accomplishment. In order to have a sense of accomplishment, you have to overcome something. And then obviously the way that you go about it, there's a right way and a wrong way for every person, which is either being authentic or being inauthentic. So the way that I experience joy, because obviously I'm donning all my, my CU stuff, and we didn't win very much, but there were still those moments where you had joy playing the game. And so it really, for me, came down to when I felt like I was in kind of this sense in this state of flow, where I was competing in a way that I felt was ideal for me. I was able to be the person that I was, and I was able to push myself further as an athlete. That really opened up this sense of joy for me. So the other side of the coin here that I think we should probably talk about, because we've talked about joy. We've all kind of defined it for ourselves. I think an interesting next place to make a stop is when we're at the end of a season and you're hearing all these coaches and these athletes talk about, like, hey, we love playing the game. There's passion, there's joy, there's all this other stuff. You have to overcome adversity, right? So one thing that I would like to ask a question about, and I actually took down a note here about the type of question that I really wanted to make sure that I asked here, was when it comes to passion, when it comes to adversity, when it comes to all these other parts of the game that obviously allow people to experience joy because you win and you overcome something and you feel that sense of joy. What is the line between like feeling joy and passion and then pure adversity? Or do you feel like they're even related in one way, shape, or another? Does adversity have to be present in order for you to experience joy and passion, what you're doing? Bill, I want your thoughts first.
I don't know if it has to be present. I would say we all know, competing in the different arenas and things that we do. Outside of taxes and a few other things in the saying, right? Like adversity is guaranteed, whether that's an injury or something out of your control or, bad night, good night, all those things. So I think it definitely is connected. I think it's great storylines, right? Allows commentators to really, blow up stories in a good way. But I think it doesn't have to be present. I think at the end of the day, listen, when I first got into college, I played a lot as a freshman, not because I was good, but we were horrible. We found ways, you could say it was adversity, but we were really just bad from day one, my freshman year, we found ways to, block out that noise and really have a lot of fun, and started figuring out amongst each other, how to be joyful, and how to really embrace the moment we were in. And of course that translated to, strengthening the program over the next few years. But I wouldn't say we went through any adversity, other than we didn't have a lot of good players, and a lot of us freshmen had to play. So, we were having fun. The scoreboard didn't indicate it, but we were having fun, and we were finding our own ways to, really support each other and roll that joy out whenever we could.
Awesome. Morgan, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'll piggyback on what Bill said. Adversity, to me, does not have to be there for joy. And I don't think in any respect, in any kind of way, I think you can find joy in a sport. Because really, if adversity needed to be there for joy in sports, I don't think a lot of people would play, to be honest. I mean, you can play the game. You can go outside and have, the weekend warriors, right? They can just go out there and have fun. I mean, look at pickleball. How much adversity is in pickleball? You guys ever play pickleball? I mean,
no, but I've seen it, and it looks
fun. I mean, there's not much adversity, but you go out there and have a bunch of joy playing pickleball. I mean, so the point of for that, but with adversity and overcoming adversity can give you, I think, a greater sense of satisfaction when you do get to that another level, or you reach back to that place where, injuries and mental fatigue and jealousy amongst teammates. I mean, there's a lot of things in adversity that can, kind of diminish joy. And then having to overcome those things, and then reaching a pinnacle, or winning, or getting close to winning, or going better than you were before, that can give you some joy too. So there's a lot of different ways to get joy. And I don't think adversity is necessary to achieve joy, but I don't know if it makes it sweeter either. I mean, maybe it does for the person that overcame it, and they'll be like, yeah, it was great. But for the person that never had adversity, I don't think they have any less joy by winning a championship than the person that overcame a broken leg and then won a championship.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this. I think for me, when it comes to joy, especially in sports, I think there's a joy in growth. And for me, like, it's not so much overcoming like something in order to win like a championship or something like that, but there's this sense of joy in competing with yourself. And so for me, I have always experienced a sense of joy when there's strain, right? Like when I'm competing, there's a sense of strain. There's a sense of you don't have to fight against something, but there's this sense of betterment. Hey, I'm pushing myself to do something better, and I can have fun doing it. Or I could not have fun doing it, but at the end of it, I'm always look back and I'm like, that was something that I enjoyed. There was enjoyment there. And so I for sure know that there are some athletes out there who absolutely experience kind of the same thing, where there's this level of stimulation that needs to occur in order for someone to start feeling this sense of joy occur, because I think joy is kind of a byproduct of putting in effort towards something. So my approach to it is slightly different, just based off of personal experiences, where if I put energy and effort into something in order to push myself in terms of personal growth, I experience joy in that facet. Now, when it comes to hold up, I didn't let this thing go to zero on anybody. I don't want to hear a single word. I didn't let this go to zero.
I was about to let you have it, man.
For anyone. So I stopped it at 1 second, because as soon as it goes to zero, I hit stop, and then it restarts it and starts going again. I took 4 seconds. You know what? Also, Morgan, you got like 30 extra seconds at the very beginning before I even remembered to start the clock.
Not true.
So Bill gets a pass now if he goes slightly over. So he's got the only card left. Here's something that I want to maybe explore before we go into maybe how people can experience more joy in sports from our own expertise. With the way the college landscape is currently laid out, is adversity and strain and like backstories of somebody coming from a really tough place in their life and they've overcome all these things. Where do you guys stand on the romanticizing of adversity and how much that could potentially create extra adversity where there doesn't need to be any? And Morgan, you're nodding your head, so I want to go to you first. What are your thoughts about that in terms of the college landscape?
About romanticizing adversity?
Yes.
I don't think you can, and this might sound way too over the top, but I'm not sure you can romanticize it enough. And what I mean by that is that you've got these young adults, these people that are trying to become adults, and some of them coming from broken homes, some of them coming from places that are just, something that I grew up in a single parent house until my mother got remarried. Watched a black and white TV that I thought was color. For my younger years of life, had Ritz crackers that I thought were cookies. So I get a little bit of that adversity with that kind of economic level. But a lot of these kids are growing up in areas and with resources that just a lot of us, would think, man, that's got to be tough. And then to come out of that and have that resiliency, we talk about resiliency a lot, whether it's in psychology or people trying to figure out, how do you have that resiliency? Where is it coming from? A lot of studies on resiliency these days about how do these, you come from the same, neighborhood, and some kids succeed and some kids don't. You're like, okay, why that kid? There's a lot of different reasons, but having and seeing that and romanticizing that, I think is great from the standpoint, and here I'll circle back to why, because it makes other kids that are in that area or have that lack of opportunity, so they see other people succeed. It's like the 4-minute mile, it was never done in human history. And then all of a sudden the guy does it. I can't remember his name. You guys probably remember his name. He does it. And then after that, it explodes. People are doing it all the time. Right?
Steve Prefontaine.
Yeah, there it is. So it's the same type of thing.
The young buck coming up with the big names.
So when you see that, I think it adds that me too, right? I can do that too. And I think that's positive. There's no way I don't think that could be a negative in my mind.
Bill, I'll come to you last because I want to give you a little bit of extra time because Morgan just took an extra minute.
I did that time. I appreciate
one
you.
Second. So Bill, I'll come to you last now. So number one, obviously romanticizing of adversity can sometimes create a rift, right? Because you have people who come from really good areas and people who come from really tough areas. And obviously, and that's just normal background. But when it comes to sports and it comes to overcoming adversity and putting yourself in a position where you can push past what you're capable of, and you put a level of strain on yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, till you get to this point where becoming a champion is just a natural occurrence. I completely agree with Morgan here that it can't be romanticized enough, that we achieve our greatest selves when we create adversity. We as human beings, that's the only way that we grow. I mean, I think I mentioned this last time. The only way that a muscle grows is if you tear it, right? You create these micro tears in your muscles from pushing it further than what its normal capacity is, and it grows back stronger. So when it comes to adversity, it's a natural part of our lives. In today's society, the term adversity within a child's life is trying to be removed with extreme prejudice. And I don't think there's a better time in order to be able to remind people that adversity is healthy than now, especially right now. So that's where I stand on it. Bill, where do you sit on adversity and the romanticization, whatever the word is of it?
Yeah.
Right.
I agree with you both 100%. I don't think you can romanticize it enough. My favorite part of bowl championship week or the playoffs or, March Madness is hearing the backdrop stories, right? The Josh Jacobs of the world who pulled himself, up to the level he was at. And I think that's amazing. I think for me, though, what I do wonder, and I'm not casting a vote for yay or nay here because I didn't grow up in this era of transfer portals and the ease when things get tough or adversity presents itself. I can just go, I'm out. So I think there's been some different things, the more romanticizing part of it, how you got to where you're at that level of being an elite athlete. I think that stuff's awesome. But I just wonder from an adversity perspective, and again, it's the time we live in, but it's so easy now, right? Like, coach don't like me. This Lamar kid's in front of me. I'm bouncing. I'm out of here. Versus, where's that story of I stuck around and I supported that Lamar kid through, Keegan Lamar through taking my spot, and then he got hurt, like the Jalen Hurts and Tunga Vailoa story. They're back and forth. So that's the part I wonder about. Have we limited some opportunities to really get through adversity?
Yeah, 100%. So we're now at the point here where I think there's two avenues that we can go. So I'm going to let it be a dealer's choice when it comes around to you guys. We've talked about joy and passion. We've also talked about adversity. Whether you stand on the side of, hey, here's how you could maybe avoid some adversity, or here's maybe how you could introduce some more adversity, or here's how you could introduce more joy and passion in your sport. I'm going to leave it up to you guys. But just to remind everybody here, obviously, we have Morgan, who is our professional on the panel when it comes to healthy habit changes in order to make get powerful results in your life. And Bill is a specialist when it comes to group dynamics and also team dynamics and how they can be changed and influenced to create championship caliber groups. And then obviously from my perspective, it is about managing distractions in order to get more of your potential to come out and play on the field to get better results. So I'm going to leave it up to you which route you want to go here, but we're talking specifically to athletes now. So whether it's the adversity route that you want to try and go down, positive or negative side of it, to have more of it or less of it, or from a joy perspective, if you want to have more of it in your life, I'm going to leave it up to you. And Bill, I'm going to start off with you here. Let's go ahead and jump in from a team dynamic perspective. What route do you want to go, and how can people get a better result when it comes to these factors?
Perfect. I'm going the joy route, and I'm going to start at the top. I think from a head coach's perspective, right? Yeah, we can go to the parents and stuff like that, but that's no fun for this show. When we look at the coaches, I think the coaches that just exude not just joy, but you can just tell they're generally always around balance or at peace, right? Like, they're never too high, they're never too low. When the team wins, players yell their credit. When they lose, there's clearly things they might have, could have, should have, would have done differently. I think from a joy perspective with the team dynamics, when it's pushed down from the top, then it becomes infectious to your players. When your players embrace it, they start acting it out through practice in the weight room, in the training, whatever your sport, whatever your arena, then that begins to roll out into the parents and then your younger kids. So I think being joyful is hard. Like, that word itself, people kind of look at you like, wow, you're weird. You're joyous right now. Like, yeah, you're excited, but joyous. So I think the embracement of that word and how you push that down with your team can really help them in all seasons, in season, off season, preseason, and it becomes infectious.
Yeah. So to reiterate there, Bill, your point is to have more joy, it starts at the top, and it starts with culture, and it starts with the way that you implement it. Correct?
Perfect. I'm writing that one down. You nailed it.
Beautiful. Hey, I'll take it.
That's probably the winner, Morgan. You don't even have to go.
Morgan, we'll have you land the plane with us. I'll have you go last on this one. So I'll go ahead and go next. And I think I want to go down the path of adversity, and I want to go down the path of the fact that when adversity strikes an athlete, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a challenge, whether it's, one thing versus another, every athlete faces adversity. We've talked about this, and I want to put out there this tool of embracing it, expecting it, and realizing that the storm, and I heard this amazing quote, no one's the same after the storm, and that's what the storm is about. When you can embrace the storm, you understand that you can become a greater person by going through it. And so when it comes to adversity, the thought that I would introduce here to any athlete is, as you face it, understand you are on the right path. Now, there's a difference between facing adversity and running into brick walls over and over and over. When you are facing adversity and it's simply challenging you to raise your game and to push through, that's a good thing. When you're facing something that doesn't make sense in every part of you, whether it's logically, emotionally, or intuitively tells you this is stupid, then listen to it. But if you are in that threshold where you have to level yourself up, embrace it. Adversity is going to be your friend, I promise you, and it will make you a better athlete than some coach who coddles you ever could. All right, Morgan, over to you, my friend.
Joy and pain, right? There's a song somewhere in there. I think somebody should do something with that. There should be a song. So joy and adversity with the individual side, we'll talk about the individual, those little habits you make, right? You can't just jump in and say, I'm going to dunk. You have to take those steps to touch the backboard, get the net, get the metal part, the top part that I'm talking about that holds the rim and makes the spring. Then you get the rim, and then you get your hand over. It's steps. And that's the thing about joy and adversity, right? Because if you go too quick and you try to jump and try to dunk the first time, it sucks, man. It's just too hard. I'm never going to do this. So, and it's adversity, and you're gonna be like, this sucks, I hate it. There's no joy in that. You're never gonna get into a flow state of trying to dunk a basketball when you're just trying to jump. But if you take little steps, create little habits along the way, what it does psychologically, there's a bunch of psychological stuff written about these things that, those little things, and then you get there and you succeed, that hormone and excitement, that makes you continue on. That makes us human, right? That's we were going across the sea because we kept traveling, kept doing things that found us joy. And the same thing, creating little habits where you're just doing a little bit at a time, getting that joy because you're achieving something, you're accomplishing something. And those are the little joys that we can accomplish every day and get into that flow state. Because Keegan, you talked about it before, about competing with yourself, right? And as you continue to move on and continue to progress, continuing to overcome those little adversities, that's where you create that joy, because you're accomplishing those tasks.
100%. No, I think you said it perfect. Which brings us over to big takeaways, right? So I'll kick this one off. Number one, I think the big takeaway that I want to call out here is actually, Morgan, what you just said, right? When it comes to joy and pain, you have to be willing to put disciplines in place, and you will be so much happier and successful as an individual when you can have a disciplined lifestyle, when you can take the small steps that are required of you. It's very, very, and I love Trevor Moawad to death. And I was talking to Bill earlier about Russell Wilson. Obviously he came here to Denver to be a Bronco. And I also brought up Trevor Moawad and the work that the two of them have done together. And neutral thinking is one of the big things that they've done so much work together on, that started with Trevor. And it takes what it takes. In order for you to dunk, you have to make the progression of touching the net, touching the orange box, touching the rim, getting your wrist on the rim. Then it's down to timing, right? Like all these different things. You have to take all the little steps. And I believe that process is what creates joy. Like you can have joy on a spectrum. You can have a little bit or you can have a lot of it. And so I completely believe that when you follow a process of powerful habits, you create more joy than if you make $1 million in just like a split second out of nowhere. You'll be more shocked than joyful because there was no process, right? When there's more of a process in place and more of disciplines in place and habits in place, it just creates more joy in everything that you do. Bill, big takeaways from this part of the conversation.
I think I'll go back to earlier what you were talking about, the adversity, right? And I think really connecting with how it molds you and shapes you, for the year after you're out of college, 5 years after, you get into a great work situation and you embrace that team. You deal with adversity in your personal life, family, all those different types of things. That'd be my, that's my takeaway. Listen, as you were going through the adversity is, yes, it's not doing the same thing over and over. That's problematic, right? Like there's changes, like you said, but on that other aspect, when you can get over those hurdles, you're just, iron sharpens iron, right? And you're just building the calluses to continue, allowing yourself to deal with that adversity beyond sports and really just become a better human being, right? Which is better for all of us. The more better human beings we have, it's better for everyone around you. So that was my takeaway.
100%. Morgan, big takeaway.
We didn't get into this as much as I think maybe we should have, Keegan and Bill, but flow for me was a big takeaway in this conversation. Flow, when I'm in the state of flow, whether it's basketball or whether it's running, whether it's training for triathlons, whether it's mixed martial arts, whatever it is that I'm doing, and I talk about it with my son and I've talked about it with other athletes, is when you're just in that moment, right? It's almost like the state of mindfulness. When you're in that moment and you're playing basketball and you're not thinking about the bills, you're not thinking about your relationships, you're not thinking about your kids or your wife, your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever it is that you have, you're not thinking about anything else but the way that ball feels in your hand. You're not thinking about anything else about where you need to be on the court. You're not thinking about anything else about how that pass needs to go to that other player. You're not thinking about anything else about, hey, did they get the score right? You're thinking about where you are in the moment. You're thinking about the game that's happening. You're thinking about where you are. And it's like, it's almost like that time where you're driving somewhere and you don't remember how you got there, right? Because you're just so in the moment.
Yep.
You're so in that flow. You're so in that state that nothing else matters. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It just, that to me, as I've gotten older, I've been able to be more mindful of those flow moments and think, man, that's why I do this. I do this because of that. And that's the joy. And you talked a little bit about this, competing against yourself. As I gotten older, I still work out a lot. I still exercise. I still get after it. But it's that I want to be able to still get after it, not at the level I could, but at the level I still can. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, that's my joy, is not getting better, but maintaining, right? At 49, I still, my son's he's going to be 15 in a couple of days. He's now dunking the basketball on a regular way. I'm like, okay, no, my days of beating him are probably pretty numbered. I'm not dunking a basketball anymore. So, and he's getting big. He's 6'2" now. I'm 6 feet. So, the joy is maintaining and getting into that flow state of athletics. And that to me is the big takeaway from this conversation about joy.
100%. All right, gentlemen, we ready to move on to the second part of this conversation, which playing the game along with playing the politics. So this came up for me simply because Kansas wins the national championship for the men's basketball, and immediately it seems to become overshadowed by this this notion of, well, what's going to happen next for Bill Self? Is he going to be even able to compete for a third championship next season? There's allegations there's like 7 different allegations that are going against University of Kansas right now. 5 of them are specifically towards the basketball team. 2 of them are against the football team. And it has to do, I think, with, from what I have read, it is specifically about brand sponsorships and players, and like inappropriate, like transactions occurring and other things like that. But this isn't the first time we've seen anything that has to do with something like this. Probably one of the more famous ones being University of Southern California, when you have, the current Seahawks coach, when he was there, you guys like Reggie Bush and all these other amazing athletes who are there, and they win a national title, and it gets stripped away. Allegations and all these different things, they happen, it seems like almost all the time in the NCAA. So the reason I wanted to bring this up is because it seems like if you are an athlete and you are in college at one point or another, you're going to be dealing with politics. Now, obviously, when you go into the professional league, you're going to be playing politics all the time because everybody wants to know every part of your life and everything matters. No matter what it is you do, even if it's down to the oatmeal you eat in the morning, like sometimes that can be even problematic for a professional athlete. But when it comes to college, these things tend to happen, and you're dealing with people who are trying to figure out their lives, and they're trying to play a sport, and then all of a sudden something political pops up, and they may or may not play a role in it or have anything to do with it or have any type of idea of how to even navigate this. So I want to dive into this a little bit, first and foremost. And number one, ask a couple questions. First question, and Bill, I'm going to come to you first. Knowing that when you're in college and you can undergo scandals or any of that other stuff from anywhere, how should athletes handle situations like this when they know it's out of their hands?
Yeah. I mean, it's risk management, right? And so as the details roll out at Kansas, which, let me preface this before my answer gets full. I am an Iowa State fan, so I will make nothing personal towards the Jayhawks, right? That's the Big 12 rivalry. But I think there's so many measures in place now, right, to at least deflect who the fingers are going to point at when this happens at your program. Now, if there's stuff like this with NIL and all that's going to be quite the road to go down if people were getting money and sharing with other players and it was known and supported. Who knows? But I think from a player's perspective, you just roll with it, right? And now they've made the portal what it is. So if it gets a little bit goofy, I'm just going to hop in the portal. If I'm good enough, somebody's going to pick me up. If I'm not good enough, I might sit in the portal. So that's a big decision for me. So I think the better player you are, dealing with this type of thing becomes easier. The kid like me who might have been able to walk on and then earned a scholarship, not that I did, but I'm saying that a kid at that level, it becomes a little more difficult, right? Because they got to weather the storm, as you said. They won't be the same once the storm passes through. And they'll just have to continue dealing with the adversity. So, that's pretty good. I kind of pulled three things together from our previous section. That's pretty good. Weather the storm, deal with adversity.
Talk about a continuation there.
Yeah.
Morgan, what's your take on this with athletes when these scandals and other types of controversies start to pull up onto a program? How do you think that they should handle them?
Well, let's start off with what happens with human nature, right? You can have all these roadblocks or stop gaps in place, right, to try to prevent hazards, try to prevent things like this. But you're going to have people fall through the cracks. You're going to have things happen because human nature with some people, we talked about this in the last show, money, right? People are going to want money. People are going to want more power. People are going to want more prestige. People are going to want their schools to be bigger and better, and boosters are going to be involved. And, they're going to want to get the top athletes, and the coaches are going to want to make sure they keep their job because they've got this lifestyle they don't want to get rid of. And this is going to happen. Unfortunately, you're just going to have an environment. I don't want to say a toxic environment. I don't know anything about Kansas. Don't know anything about USC. There's a lot of different places, whether it's Louisville or Memphis. There's different places that have different situations. But when you have people that value money and you have people that value power and value prestige over probably what's right for the kids and for the university, you're going to always get situations like this because there just aren't enough stopgaps in place. There's just not enough collaboration with enough people. So my take on this is just, again, it goes back to follow the money. There's going to be always people that are going to take advantage of the system. Some are going to get caught and some aren't, right? I mean, there's so many people that haven't gotten caught that are doing the exact same thing.
Yep. I completely agree. And my answer or my take on this is going to be kind of a combination of what you both have said so far. If you're an athlete and you're at any type of university where there's something that happens, I believe that the number one way that you deal with it, obviously it becomes easier if you're a better player because you can just remove yourself from the equation. You don't have to deal with it because you have the luxury of moving somewhere else. But if you don't have that luxury, I mean, first and foremost, it's going to suck because you're on the team and it's the only thing everybody's asking you, right? When you're an athlete on campus, everybody's going to ask you, hey, do you know information about this? Do you know information about that? Everybody wants to know. And if you're part of the team, that's all you're being asked. And so, I mean, one thing that can be a little bit controversial for maybe an athlete who doesn't have the star power as, you know, maybe somebody else on the team, but this might be an interesting team dynamic, is to have team come together and say, hey, this needs to be taken off of our shoulders and this needs to be put back onto the coaches, because the athletes are going to get absolutely berated by their peers about these things. And it's on the athlete to be able to say, this isn't mine to deal with. You need to deal with and get this off of us because it's becoming a distraction to our ability to be able to perform, right? Or even be a normal kid at college. It's a problem. So the next question that I have when it comes to these types of things is, when these things come up, right? Kansas just won the NCAA tournament, and, or like, you know, USC wins national championship or whatever. Where do you guys think that the scales should weigh in terms of an athletic program or the athletes in it being discounted from the accolades that they've won when allegations arise? Because it's very easily something that in the news overshadows it, but this is more probably from a fan's perspective type of question, because as soon as something comes up, obviously everybody's going to sit there and they're going to say, oh, you cheated, you this, you that. Like, where do you guys see the discounting potentially coming in or even playing a part? And Bill, since you have more of a team dynamic view on some of this, I'd be interested to actually start with you. Who do you think should be taking the hit when it comes to any of this stuff coming up? Doesn't matter if it's the coach or a player or any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Should there be any discounting? And if so, where should it happen?
Yeah, I think so. I'll go back to kind of like I did before with the top. I think it should start with the NCAA. I think their lack of, direction, right? And that gets into a whole other discussion. What's it going to look like in a few years? But I mean, really, until they come out with, if you follow the process, like in our world, we have to do, right? Grand jury, your peers, guilty, boom. Most things have a generalized sentence. And so until, I think players should always be protected unless it clearly is one that I'm farming myself out, right? Like, hey, Coach Lamar, hey, Coach Koth, whoever gives me the most money in that goofy scenario of the old blue chips, right? That's where I'm going. But outside of that, I think when this thing happens, I think if this is true with Kansas, Bill Self should not be allowed to coach at any level above high school for 5 years. That's just a random number. That whoever the athletic director is should be put out for 5 years, so to speak. Until you start getting true consequences and accountability, we all know what risk management means, right? Plausible deniability. And so, yep, I might have to move on. And then I'll be at Kentucky in a couple of years when they get tired of their coach. So I think that is the accountable piece. I think we should protect the players as much as possible. And it should start at the head of the snake.
Okay, Morgan, should there be any discounting going on with accolades won by teams and the players And if so, who should be held accountable?
I think Bill ended off right. The players need to be protected. I don't think it's fair when you say, hey, the next 3 years, you can't play in the NCAA tournament. That does nothing for what happened. That's like in kindergarten when, one kid was talking and then nobody could go to recess for the next 2 days. What is that? I mean, that doesn't teach you anything. It's not teaching these kids anything. The people that did it got away with it. Again, I come back to the money. Follow the money. Adidas gives somebody money. You know what? A NCAA should come in and say, Adidas, guess what? You're losing some sponsorships, right? Let's hit him where it counts, because that's where it matters. You think that guy is going to do it again? That guy's probably going to lose his job now because it's cost Adidas millions of dollars, right? Nobody's going to do that from Adidas again, and now Nike's going to understand. Okay, we can't do that. Okay, when a booster gives money, you know what? That booster now gets kicked off. He can't be a booster anymore. He can't do this. He loses his privilege. He loses his rights to come to the games and to be that big man or big woman on campus, right? Like Bill said, you got to hit the people that matter where it counts. Get those people out of there. Protect the students they're young, they're kids, there's all these big lights. We talked about Harry Miller last time. I mean, all these things happening, these kids, protect the kids. And the coach, you're right. The coach is responsible too. Oh, plausible deniability. He knew. If he didn't know, he should have known. He should be fired for not knowing because he's stupid, right? And AD's got a little bit of it. I mean, AD might not know, but okay, he should know too. Again, protect the athletes, get the people that matter, get them out of there.
100%. Okay. So I'm very much I think there's a general consensus here that the players should be protected because, number one, I look back at, the USC stuff. They got stripped of their national championship. Reggie Bush got stripped of his Heisman Trophy. The dude was still more than good enough of an athlete to be able to win that with any team, to be able to do that with any team. Did not matter. Why punish every single person for the faults of one? If you're an athlete and you're coming from, and we talked about adversity and romanticizing it, if you're an athlete and you are going to a university and someone is wanting to give you a handout and you come from a rough background, of course you freaking take it. Like there's in no way, shape, or form, if you're an athlete, should you ever, and obviously, NCAA has rules, but I think they're all bullcrap because I think at some point it's going to turn tables where it's just going to be, hey, this is turning into basically professional sports 2.0, where every athlete can make as much money as they want. Obviously, name, image, and likeness is this total Wild West still. And I think in a few years, it'll slowly start to change a little bit. But yeah, it's tough because the athletes still put in the work, they still put in the effort, they still won the championship, and they still competed. I think they need to be protected, and I think the people who were involved, whether it's from a managerial, coaching, whatever, those are the people who need to get hit hard. Why? Because they're getting paid the most.
Yep.
Right? The athletes are getting paid BS comparatively to it, and therefore they should be protected. Okay, now that we're all warmed up and we're feeling spicy, here's the next question. How should athletes prepare themselves coming out of high school to handle situations like this from a social perspective or from a coaching perspective? I'm curious to hear your all's thoughts, because if these things come up, most of these athletes have no clue how to handle these things or deal with these things. And this is something that has never been thrown their way. And so I'm curious, when it comes to dealing with something that is or is not a part of your own world and maybe controversial, how can an athlete prepare themselves to be able to deal with these things? How should they start thinking about it? And assuming that the person that you are going to be talking to is either a freshman in college or a senior in high school. Morgan, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you wish every high school in America could have mentors for all their athletic programs, right? I mean, you just wish, because you want to say, hey, let's put it to the coach. Let's put it to the coaches out there to say, hey, let's get our athletes we talk about this a lot, right? We're not only getting our athletes ready for the next game, the next tournament, the next whatever it might be, we're also getting them ready for life. And if we could have that ability for coaches to be able to talk not only about the game, but about life, about respect, about values, about integrity, about what to expect at the next level if they go to the next level, whether it's sports or life in the next level, right? There's that wish, again, you put it on the coach and you say, wish every coach could get training to be able to have those conversations about positive psychology, about motivational, about things that can go on after sports or in sports in college, and be able to have that direction that they can give them a roadmap and say, hey, we've been here, or have people come in and talk about, hey, they've been there. This is what they found. This is what they went through. These are some of the life lessons we can learn about their experiences, about their trials and tribulations. So, again, that having a mentor where somebody could, be in every school. To that said, maybe there's $1 million business to be able to put some videos together and say, hey, these are for all high school students out there going to the next level. Here's what these students they're learning. Here's what these, these prospects are learning and have learned, that they've gone through the process. And here's something we can learn and follow. And here's a roadmap to be able to help us follow that. So that's my takeaway.
Awesome. Bill, what are your thoughts about how young athletes can prepare themselves for the politics that can ensue at the college level?
Yeah, I'd say two things. First off, the day you make your decision, before you make that decision, be professional and righteous with everybody else that was courting you, right? Like the individuals I work with, my son, for example, and much smaller level, right? We're not talking big time D1 or anything. But the day he decided where he wanted to go, my first question to him was, have you already talked to all the other coaches? And his response was, yeah, I texted him. Nope, that was not the question. Have you talked to them? You need to reach out to them and say, Coach Lamar, thank you. I appreciated everything. Here's where my decision. And I think that's important for two reasons. As our generations evolve with social media, we're losing the fine art of talking to people, right? When we even delivering bad news. But number two is, you never know when that door might have to reopen, because whether it's a probation type thing or allegations like this, could be just that coach leaves, right? Or something happens, or you get injured. So, how they make that announcement and the work they do beforehand, I think is most important. And then secondly, just be prepared to know who you're going to seek out as a resource if that situation presents itself. Who is going to be your confidant that you go to for advice if it shows up.
And I'll take some of my time to just respond to something that you said. I could have been way better when I chose what college that I went to, because I was between two colleges, University of Colorado and somewhere else, and they're offering me basically the same thing. This other college was just like, commit and we'll offer you a scholarship. And I'm like, give me the scholarship and I'll commit. And I said, I'm going to give you like 5 minutes, and in order to think this over, you guys want me, if you offer me, I'm coming. And I said, I'll give you 5 minutes. If you don't, like in that 5 minutes, because I have Coach Embry, I have John Embry on the other line waiting to hear from me about where I want to go. I said, I'll give you 5 minutes. And if I don't hear anything, I'm going to call and commit to CU. And 5 minutes came and went. I called CU, and I did not gracefully handle the situation with the other school, because they called back and they said, we just can't do anything. I said, sounds good. I can't wait to beat your ass at Mile High. So I could have handled it better. And when we went and we played them, I went and shook his hand and I said, no hard feelings. And he said, I completely understand. Number one way that people should be able to handle this stuff is in Ollie Allerton. He was a special forces in the British military. He said this: if you're dealing with certain things in your realm and you're feeling stressed about it, write down all the things that are stressing you out or that are distractions, and cross off the things that you don't control and deal with the things that you can. I'll leave that there. Okay.
Hold on. I got to go back to something you said, Keegan.
Yes.
Did you win?
Yep.
All right. That's it. You can't leave that out of the story. I mean,
Yes,
you gotta.
we did win, and also in that same game beforehand, I was a big Steelers fan. Well, I am a big Steelers fan, and Joey Porter. Now, the school I'm talking about here is University of, whereas Colorado State University. So when I said Mile High, that's where we go play. It's the Rocky Mountain Showdown. And before the game, Joey Porter, who's their linebackers coach, obviously very famous, Steelers linebacker. I walked over to him and I was like, "Hey man, just want to say, like, big fan of yours." And he turns to me and just says, "Go fuck yourself."
Wow.
And I was just like, fair enough. I'll talk to you after the game, maybe. Come shake your hand or something like that after the game.
Or not.
And after, and could not find him after the game. I was just like, damn it. He was like he was a little bit of a hero of mine. But yeah, we wound up winning. We lost to them once in the entire time that I was there. Otherwise, we were hoisting that trophy. It was a good time. But anyways, let's land this plane, gentlemen. We covered some interesting topics here. I'm curious, final thoughts, comments, other things like that are burning on your mind, but based on the topics that we've talked about. And to remind everybody, what we have covered so far is joy and passion when it comes to sports, because everybody's talking about it in their post-game meetings and all these other things. What the hell does it actually mean to some of us? And how do you experience it more as it relates to adversity, right? They seem to go hand in hand. And then secondly, we covered the politics that can come up in the collegiate space. So I'm curious, gentlemen, Bill, I'll open it up to you first. Any final thoughts or comments?
I don't think so. I mean, that, okay. I'll phrase it like this, since you had some ideas earlier today around the golf world. So I'm going to phrase it around this.
Whoa.
This weekend, and I'm going to write it down on the board for next week for Jabs. For you two, who's going to handle adversity the most and have the most joy when everything's said and done in Augusta? Who's your pick?
That's a good question.
And then if DraftKings wants to call and sponsor us, we'll have this section.
We'll have our over-unders, all that other things.
While he's thinking, Morgan, who you taking this weekend?
Man, you caught me at golf. I know Tiger Woods, man.
I'll read off some names.
No, I'm not picking. I am not picking Tiger Woods. I'm not picking Tiger Woods to win. That's for darn sure. But man, golf is not my sport. I like playing once a year, but as far as following golf and who's there, honestly, I was one of those fans that loved it when Tiger was there. When he dropped off, so did I. So
who are you picking?
I have no idea. You could tell me, you could say the names of 7 players and I'd be like, okay, they kind of sound familiar, and I'll pick the top. I'll pick one. I don't even know. So you got me with golf. I'm not somebody who can tell you about and talk to you about golf.
All right, Keegan. That's ridiculous.
So what was the question?
I like winning this weekend.
I like Xander Schauffele because he had a rough go at it not long ago at Augusta, where he was in the hunt, and I don't know if it was a double or a triple bogey that took him out of the hunt of making this crazy comeback. And I think he's somebody who is he's going to be a really hungry golfer this weekend, really locked in, very focused, and he's got a chip on his shoulder coming into this weekend. I'm a big fan of him. He's a younger guy. And I think he is going to be someone to keep an eye on. And there I have his name right in the middle up in on my screen, Xander Schauffele. Big fan of him. Love the way that he plays. I love the focus and the composure that he has when he plays. I think he carries himself super well. I think obviously all eyes are on Tiger. They can't not be, right? Because the guy almost lost his leg. Think of him however you will. He's a legend on the course. However, a lot of press, a lot of buzz. And if he's wearing red on Sunday, anything can happen. So it's going to be fun.
Right. So I got him on the board. I got you with Xander. Morgan, I gave you DJ, Dustin Johnson.
That's another good pick.
Nicholas, because you're from Ohio, but that wasn't nice. And I'm going with JT, Justin Thomas.
All right. We'll see how well we do. And this next week, I'll be very interested to dive into specifically what we took away from watching some of the matches, whether it's opening round, who pulls ahead, who had great performances, other stuff like that. Although we know, hey, we're all dads around here. So at some point it'll just be like, well, watched about 30 minutes, took about a 3-hour nap, woke up when the final pairing was coming around the 16th and watched that. So that's an ode to all dads out there. Get ready to get comfy.
Yeah, watching golf is not going to happen for me, but I will get the highlights on ESPN, and I'll make sure that I'm prepared for the conversation at hand.
Beautiful. Morgan, final thoughts on today's conversation.
Final thoughts. I like this conversation we had with joy and adversity, because when you talk about joy and adversity, especially when it comes to sports, it lends itself to everything else in life. It leads into all aspects. I know I'm biased and we're talking about sports and I played sports, but I do firmly believe that when you play a sport, whether it's even one, I think team sports might be a little bit better when it comes to finding dynamics and relationships and leadership. We can go into that at some point, but even the solo sports, whether it's racquetball or tennis, or those all types of things, there's joy and adversity, and there's camaraderie with other players and other people and coaches and staff, and how to talk to people. And there's people that do things for you that you've got to have hopefully some kindness and empathy to them, right? Because you don't do anything alone in sports. Even if you are doing a sport that is like golf or tennis, where you're out there by yourself, but you're obviously you're not alone. Yeah. So there's so much joy to be had in playing sports. And we talk about adversity and overcoming adversity. And you know what? There's people out there that, don't overcome adversity. No, I don't mean that they end up dying. We don't want to talk about that so much, but that break their leg or get a tear in their Achilles or tear, Bo Jackson. You get certain situations that, they just don't come back, right, from the adversity to the person they were before. So that's an interesting topic where you got to dive into that person and be like, okay, they just didn't make it back and they were at the top of their game. Like what happens to that person, but where do they still find the joy? Because they do. At some point it's like the rules of 3s and 5s. 3 weeks, 5 months, and then years go by. You get those times where you start to feel better and you start to feel the joy in life again. So for me, it's just about sports and about being able to be that person that finds the joy in doing things regardless of the adversity, but overcoming that and just finding the joy in doing things that sports lends itself to be, with the camaraderie and the teammates and the leadership and just the flow state and the things it does for your health and your mind. That joy and adversity combined is just, to me, magic.
Yeah. And we'll have to do an episode sometime soon, specifically on Bo Jackson, just because he's such a fascinating individual.
He really is.
Not only from his alter ego that he has been publicly quoted as saying that every single game that he played, His alter ego was Jason Voorhees, which makes a whole lot of sense when you watch him play. He's basically just an undead monster. And then even the way that his career ended, just being so strong that his body was incapable of keeping his muscle attached to the bone. And when, you know, on the one play where he snapped his quad, right? Like that's, the man's too powerful, and just the kind of person that he carried himself as in between. So he would be a very fascinating person to have an episode on, and just like see how that applies to what athletes can take away from that today, from some of the things that we learned from watching him. Gentlemen, as always, this has been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate you both. Next week, we're going to be having Kim Brady on. So
maybe
like this series,
if she shows up this time,
if she shows up, we're holding the space for her. We got her
scared.
seat warm. She'll get in here and mix it up with us. But as always, gentlemen, appreciate it. And anybody who's listening to this, if you want to like, subscribe, comment down below what you like the most, who you agreed with the most, what were your takeaways. If you have an interesting name that we should be calling this, feel free to throw that in and let us know where you heard this episode on. But otherwise, we appreciate all of you. And until next time, thanks, everybody.
Till next time, take care. Thanks.
Hey, Keegan.